Hello and welcome to Business Reporter's Pensions Campaign, hosted by the Telegraph Online. I'm Alistair Green and today I'm going to be talking to Andy Hawthorne about how to best secure your pension in a cost-efficient and time-efficient way. Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, the recent pension freedoms seem to have created more questions than they've actually answered. So let's start off with one of my questions. Why is pension advice so expensive?
Well, I think the first thing to qualify is that you mean authorised and regulated advice, which is by a professional person. I think that the people consider advice to be expensive for two reasons. Firstly, that they feel they're expected to pay directly up front. And secondly, that it has to be delivered face to face. I have every sympathy with people that are suffered or feel they're suffering in that way. But it doesn't need to be that way. If you can streamline the advice process without reducing the quality, and you can ensure that the cost of the advice comes out of the pension fund, it makes it a whole different exercise. And the only way you can establish that is by seeking authorised advice from a professional, which is totally different to guidance. The guidance doesn't answer, because if you don't ask the right questions, which is unlikely you will understand the outcome of, how can you make a balanced decision?
Now, one of those questions that people may be asking in connection with these new freedoms is whether or not they should be taking money out of their funds, which of course you now can do. Yeah. The only question with that is that you could actually keep on taking money out. You, I guess, could wind up with nothing left in your pot.
Unfortunately, yes. We are human beings and the temptation is there to spend. But the reality is that the principle of supporting long-term an income from a pension is you start off with a capital sum, and then from that capital sum you withdraw amounts of money, some of which can be tax-free, usually 25% of the fund, either in one go or spread out over a long period of time. But when you consider what you're fetching out of that fund, if it's not being matched by the growth in that fund, you are reducing the capital value. Smaller capital value produces smaller levels of income, and if you continue to do that year on year unchecked, it'll spiral down to nil. So plan carefully, preferably with an advisor, and review it regularly and adjust accordingly.
So have these announcements made any difference to when you should start thinking about beginning to plan for your pension?
Not really. I mean, you can take a pension out for a child these days. So you should start planning for a pension as early as possible, but using common sense budgeting and within your lifestyle. What you must always do, though, is ensure that you've got savings that you can access for life's emergencies. It's pointless having a pot of cash which you can't get hold of till age 55. And so once again, with a regulated and authorised advisor, you set a plan, you review it in line with its performance and your circumstances and needs, and you make adjustments.
You were talking there about your pension pot, and of course the pension pot traditionally was converted into an annuity. Yes. And this whole system has now allowed you to take from that pot, and you don't have to buy an annuity. Does that mean that effectively the days of an annuity are over?
I don't believe so. I think annuities can be excellent. One has to remember that they do give you a guaranteed income. These days, an annuity can be purchased with just some, not all of your pension pot. It's not an either-or situation, it's a choice. Since the changes, annuities have become more flexible, so they can be adjusted and adapted over short or long periods of time to match in with your needs. What one has to remember is that pension freedoms were actually introduced so that people with small pension pots weren't stuck with trivial pension payments, and the Chancellor wanted to give them an option. It doesn't mean to say that annuities were or are bad. It's just that for most people, or a lot of people anyway, they didn't have much choice.
So let's talk about Pensionlite. What is it exactly that you offer and how do you meet today's market needs?
In a very straightforward way. Pensionlite have always offered a no obligation pension review and recommendation service by post. That's carried out in a tried and tested way. It's personal to the client. We do that over the telephone, email, text, and in a written report. That means that the client can get the information which they know is tailored to them, and they can consider it in their own time, in their own home, without any pressure. They have access to us to ask us questions in whichever medium suits them. And then moving forward, if they decide that they don't want to accept the advice, there's no charge. It's very transparent. If they accept the advice, they'll know exactly how much, because the reports contain all of those details specific in pounds, shillings and pence, before they make any decisions. Our byword is you only pay for the advice you accept.
Okay, well, let's look at what they do pay for. How does your fee structure work?
Well, we all operate, or should operate, within the FCA guidelines. And in terms of remuneration, it's by client agreed remuneration. I stress agreed. In our case, we provide that up front in great detail, including initial advice charge and any, if appropriate, ongoing service charge, which is specific to that client, so they know exactly what that will cost. If they don't accept the advice, as I've already said, there's no charge. If they do, they know exactly what they're going to pay, and they can choose how they pay us.
Now, pensions, of course, are all about planning for the future. So let's look to the future for a second. There's been a lot of changes, and there's probably more changes along the way. So let's fast forward a little bit. Where do you see the whole environment, the whole industry in, say, the next 5-10 years?
I think the industry has to adapt. It's got to be seen and deliver better value for money in a more convenient and accessible way. I think plans will change and develop to be more flexible so that they can adapt to future lifestyle changes, but without penalties and things that, if you like, traditionally they've been involved in it. I think people will expect the industry to deliver a quality of service and standard of service that we expect in lots of other areas and aspects of commerce.
Well, it's been fascinating finding out more, and certainly you've given us a lot to think about as well. One thing's for sure, we need some good advice. Andy Hawthorne from Pensionlite, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.